People are buttholes. Most of the people I know try to teach their kids that cops are good. Cops are the people you call when you need help. If you are lost at the mall, find a police officer. Cops are to be looked up to and respected. They always do the right thing. And yet, sometimes the right thing is the hardest, and from a child's eyes, meanest thing you can do. Tonight, some guy got in a fight with his GF. It got ugly. He broke her garage door. She threw his son's piggy bank on the front lawn, shattering it. They slap each other around, and then he gets in his car with his 4-year-old son, William, and drives away. Another officer pulls him over a mile away. We talk to him, we talk to her. They both broke the law. They both committed criminal damage and assault. And they both did it in front of young William. Now while the other officer is interviewing Dad at the side of the road, young William starts to get out of the car, on a major road. I rush over, usher him back into the car, and spend some time talking to him. William is 4. He's maybe 3 feet tall, and can't weigh more than 60 pounds. He's wearing shorts, only shorts. It's too hot for a shirt and Dad said he didn't need shoes. His words. I agree. Most little boys don't need shirts or shoes. I tell him to sit in the driver's seat, and he tells me he's not old enough to drive. He's adorable. William goes on to tell me, in a lispy hard to understand 4-year-old tone, that Dad and his GF fight all the time. He tells me that Dad burns her books, and that she broke his piggy bank. She took all of William's pennies and won't give them back. She also stole all of Dad's money. I asked him why she took his money. His reply? Because she's a bitch. Pronounce bis if you are 4. This little boy has absorbed all the violence, all the hate, all the anger, and all the name calling. 4-year-olds shouldn't be telling you that Dad's GF gets all pissed off all the time. By this time, the other officer determines that not only did Dad commit domestic violence, but he's also impaired due to alcohol and driving. With William in the car, Dad needs to go to jail. He has to. The law is written that way. We no longer have a choice. We walk Dad away from his car, behind mine, and place him in cuffs. He gets put in a car, and I make arrangements for William for the night. A babysitter. I return to the car, where William has tears streaming down his face, and is sobbing relentlessly. I ask him what's wrong. He tells me he wants his dad. I tell him that Dad needs to hang out with us for a while, but I arranged a sleepover with his babysitter. And he cries. The other officer leaves with Dad. I stay with William. He is beside himself with tears. I open the door and reach to him. He climbs up my arms like a little chimp. I've never been held by a cop, but it can't be the greatest. There's the gun, and the cold badge, and the radio, and all the other pokey things on the belt. But I try. I hold William, and tell him everything will work out. And he cries. He cries and cries. He cries and repeats Daddy, Daddy, Daddy over and over again. He cries and calls out so loud, that when I try to ask for another unit to help me, my dispatcher can't hear me over his cries. And I pace, and I bounce, and I pet his hair, and I whisper, and I touch my forehead to his, and I rub his back. And he cries, and he wants his dad. And here I am, at 1 a.m., on the side of a road, in the red and blue strobe of a big steel cruiser, dressed in black, with more accessories than a Barbie playhouse on my belt, holding this shirtless, sobbing, tearful 4-year-old boy, who wants nothing other than his father. And I start to cry, and I feel like shit, and I want my son, and I want so desperately for his dad not to have fucked up so badly. And while he repeats his cries for his dad, I hold his head close, and tell him it's going to be okay. And quat. And he sniffs, and says okay. And quat. But it's not, and he knows it, and I know it. And we walk on the sidewalk, as I hold him, and we cry. And nothing is okay. Because this 4-year-old sponge, who knows that Dad and his GF fight, and knows that she is a bitch, and knows that she has his pennies, now also knows that the cops took his father away from him. And he will never forget it. The babysitter shows up, and takes young William from me. And in a way, I really don't want to let go. I want to keep him, and tell him it will be better. I want to be there when Dad gets back, so I can show him that it did get better. And the babysitter tells me that Mom left when he's 6 months old, and I choke. Dad is all this kid has, and I took him away from him. Or did I? No. Dad left. Dad fucked up. Dad made a series of horrible decisions. Dad decided to fight, to follow his GF home, to fight, to get out of his car, to fight, and then to return to his car, where he put his life, William's life, and everyone else's life in danger, by driving drunk. And that's why he's gone now. But try to explain that to William, who can't even pronounce book yet, but will always remember the day those cops dressed in black came and took his dad away from him. So, who's the asshole now? I guess it depends on how old you are. I agree that a social worker can provide this sort of service better than someone else can. However, I think that the current victim services programs work. The advantage of them is that there's enough money for the program to be in place, whereas the police departments wouldn't be able to get the money to keep a paid professional on call all the time. It's a lot cheaper to pay for volunteers training, especially when there's a requirement to give a certain amount of time back. This is an old post, but I was that kid once. I actually thank the officers and social workers that helped me. I think I'm a better person for it. I may have hated them in the moment, but looking back, they were the best thing that happened to me. You may be causing a temporary pain, but you're doing the right thing and I thank you for it. I'm just going to hope that wherever he lives has a functional child welfare system. In theory, assuming this happened in the US, the father should receive substance abuse treatment, counseling, and a parenting class in order to help him become a fit parent. And I'll hope that wherever this family lives has a thoughtful prosecutor and judge, so the father doesn't go to jail for a long time, but is required to stay away from the girlfriend and complete whatever services CPS recommends as part of his probation. So I'm super late to this game, but your story was linked from another post, and I wanted to share my story with you because I feel like you need it. When I was younger, my mom had a lot of problems. She's an alcoholic, she has mental illnesses, and she was abusive to both me and my sister. The local police responded to dozens of calls to my house, but my mom was very convincing, and I was told by the sergeant, who handled domestic calls, multiple times that I needed to shape up and stop being so unruly. He wasn't nice about it. The final call before my sister and I were taken away, I spoke to a different officer. I had bloody and broken lips from being slapped and punched, and he told me that he couldn't remove me from the house even though I begged him to. Finally, a few months later I got up the courage to run, and I went to my grandparents' house. The subsequent scene was horrendous, and my mom was arrested. The part I really wanted to tell you about though, is that 3 years later, during my senior year of high school, that same sergeant approached me during a school function. We always had officers there. He proceeded to apologize to me for not listening closer, and not asking more questions. He blamed himself for the hell I continued to go through, because he thought he could have and should have done more. Maybe he should have. So, I hugged that man, and told him that it was okay, that things worked out the way they should have, and that I was okay. Moral of the story, is that maybe William doesn't understand now. I sure didn't, but someday, he will, and he'll remember that hug, and he'll be grateful for it. Maybe you arresting his dad saved him from a lifetime of turmoil from domestic violence and alcohol abuse. I'll always be grateful to that sergeant that took the time to remember me. It showed me that police are people too, and that they have to do their job the way they see fit. My ex-wife lost the plot many years ago. Her cheese slid right off her cracker, and she started having suicidal thoughts. She started considering painless ways to kill herself and my daughter that would look like an accident. She confided in her friend/landlady, and the landlady contacted me, but not before this situation went down. The ex took off in the car, heading for a friend's place about 800 kilometers away. She had told me that she was going up there to help a friend with her daycare. She'd helped out before, and I agreed to miss a couple of days' visitation so she could go. Turns out, she'd lied again, and was heading up there to live. About a week later the landlady contacted me and told me about her confession. Within an hour, I was in a lawyer's office. I feared for my daughter's safety, and rightfully so. The lawyer and his assistant were amazingly kind, helpful, and calmed down a father who wanted to race up a winding mountain road and do whatever it took to secure his daughter. We went before a judge, after spending time assessing the situation, contacting her family, her landlady, and asking if each would swear an affidavit. They all agreed to. The judge gave us an ex-parte order, one where the accused isn't present, and insisted that I go up there and involve the local police. That's where the officers come in. The SO was reluctant to oblige, asking me repeatedly if I really wanted to do this. I repeatedly showed him the sworn testimony of her former landlady and her parents, and at one point I even asked him what he'd do if someone threatened to kill his daughter. This drove the point home. The other officer was amazing. She took my daughter to the car, gave her a Mountie stuffed bear, which she still has, almost 10 years later, let her know that it was going to be okay, even though the poor kid was just confused and crying, completely out of sorts because of everything that was happening. The officer who brought my daughter to me quite possibly saved her life. Since then the ex has sought help, received it, and we now share custody. There hasn't been a single episode since, even through the supervised visitation and partial visitation that I insisted on. So again, to you and the officers like you, keep up the good work. You don't get nearly enough of the praise you deserve. Is she neglecting or endangering her children? If you're in the US, or most other countries, you can report it to your local child welfare agency. Not everyone knows this, but CPS actually has a federal mandate to put their best efforts into keeping families together whenever it's safe to do so. When there's abuse or neglect that isn't severe, and a family just needs some help, child welfare services can provide that help. They often have extensive resources available such as substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, housing assistance, etc. They only remove children from the home as a last resort. The sooner you call them, the more likely they can help your acquaintance before it's too late. First of all, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You have a tough job, and as someone who has been around love for a good portion of their life I am grateful for what you do. It may have been a bad situation, but you made it so much better by just being there and reassuring him. I can guarantee he will remember that you were there for him. Hey, I know I'm pretty late, but I want to thank you. Having an absent parent is a really terrible feeling. 1. You can't have that role model, and 2. You realize when you're older that you're missing something that most need to grow up with. Like, you're inherently missing something. I have always had an appreciation of cops, even though I live in Portland, and my mom is in the mental health field. So, she isn't the biggest fan of our cops, but I've never had anything but pleasant experiences. Your story made me tear up and made me really appreciate you and knowing that you're out there. When you described you holding him and the solitude of you outside being bathed in the red-blue light made me emotional. What I'm trying to say is, thank you.